Welcome to the Prolific Creation Podcast. Today we're joined here with Tommy, creator of Stash House. So, welcome, Tommy, and thank you for being here with us. Can you kind of tell us what was your thought process of creating Stash House?
Yeah, so to give some backstory, I came from film and TV. I came to LA to do sort of screenwriting, film, TV, that kind of stuff. And it was when I was exploring that industry that I was kind of partnered. We had some mutual friends, and we were told we should connect. A writing partner named Dawn. We had similar sensibilities, and I was confused why are we being match made? Am I not a good enough writer? But reading Don's stuff, he was really good at crafting character, and he was a really solid writer. And I realized working with a partner is really nice in a creative endeavor. So it was really that matchmaking that sort of led us to become writing partners. So we wrote together for a while, and then, we both got really burnt out in the film and TV side. I was working at Disney, Dawn worked at Paramount, and we were both just very, I think, burnt out on the creative and the business side of things. And so when immersive stuff began to sort of pop up, I was really intrigued, and I found that area like this sort of renewed interest in creative for me. So I started trying to just reach out to anyone in the escape room and immersive world. And this was right at the beginning of like the US growth. And so I think literally there had been one or two escape rooms in LA. And I'd happened to go to them early, and I was contacting the people that made them, just saying like, hey, please, let me be part of this. Let me help. And so I told Dawn about it because we were writing together, and Dawn saw what I saw too. He's like, okay, this is cool. So that's sort of how we moved from being writing partners to business partners.
Okay.
And what really intrigued us about the escape room world was the writing ability. The ability to craft stories in the world was really interesting to me, especially because the stuff we had seen up to that point was just it was pretty raw, and that's expected. It's a brand new industry. It's people trying their hand at something, new because they saw something and were inspired by it and rushing to make something. The very first one in LA was the trapped in a room with a zombie that Marty, the guy from Ohio, started, that he just sort of spread everywhere.
Right.
So I reached out to Marty, and he became sort of a mentor to me and Dawn. We were originally going to work with him, and then after we got sort of deep in discussions, he was really aggressive about being in and out fast.
Okay.
He was not going to be in escape rooms for a long time. And he sort of said, maybe we shouldn't partner up, but, take the knowledge I gave you and good luck. So we had to sort of think, okay, well, we're not designing for Marty. We're designing now for us to fund and make. That changed the perspective when someone else was paying the bills. So we were really inspired by trying to find a space that felt dangerous, that felt cool, that felt interesting. And we were trying to really just hone in on what that would be. And initially there was some talk about doing an apartment. Could we actually find an apartment building that had some way to do it? And obviously, you have customers coming and going, it's residential, it's not zoned properly. You're going to get shut down pretty fast.
Right.
So how could we make that vibe? How could we make it feel like an apartment? How could we make it feel like it's a place that, is lived in? And that's sort of, the way we started looking for spaces. So Dawn found the location we're at in Koreatown. It was this sort of rundown dress store that the owner had just abandoned. Left everything behind, including the cash register. And it was just all the merchandise. The building was in really bad condition.
Yeah.
But we saw the potential of it. And this was just sort of, this feels right. And so, we went from transforming that space from a dress shop to Ray's apartment.
Yeah, that's crazy. I'll be honest with you, my wife and I are at about 130, I think, escape rooms right now. And so when we first got into escape rooms, the way that we would find out about other escape rooms was usually the game masters. This is before we even found out about Morty. And Stash House was actually kind of like an urban myth legend. Have you done this one where it's kind of like at an apartment, and I don't remember where it's at or what it's called. I'm like, no. I'm like, okay, maybe we'll find it, from another game master. And then all of a sudden, all these game masters yeah, it's this one, and this one's super great. You have to do it. And finally we got, it's called Stash House. We have to do this. We've heard so many great things, and finally when we did it, we're like, wow, it lived up to the hype. We were just completely mesmerized of of from the moment you step in, you almost think like, okay, like almost like a typical escape room where it's okay, this is the lobby, this is the okay, introduction. We're told like, hey, these are the rules. Do this, whatever, and then like, okay, here you go, and we're like, what? It's starting like this is it. And so it was amazing to experience like, okay, like it actually feels like we're in this scenario and that we're completely entranced and immersed into the scene and being able to participate in the activities that we needed to do, and then just how everything just flowed and worked well together. So it definitely like made something super amazing that lives up to the hype that's behind it. um so then can you kind of walk us through your creative process as far as the writing aspect of it?
Yes, and thank you for the kind words. It's very humbling. When we started it, we didn't quite know what we were doing. It was a lot of ideas and things that we had seen, you know, uh, in other mediums, like in writing and in storytelling, that we wanted to sort of inject into escape rooms.
Hmm.
We were really inspired by like the humor and style of like Grand Theft Auto, those games, and then Breaking Bad and The Wire. Those were sort of our three big reference points
Right.
for how we wanted guests to feel. And so injecting that was really important, but also just like the feeling of having been a guest at other places where the lobby and sort of the onboarding is dragged on. Just a lot of little things like that, that how can we change this or tweak this in some ways and see how it works. And so it was really gratifying that people responded to it in the way they did. So it was just completely unexpected. We weren't quite sure if it would work or not. As far as the process, we knew we wanted it to be a drug dealer's apartment. And we really sort of went back and forth crafting the character of Ray. That was the most important sort of linchpin, because Ray's presence was meant to be menacing, but not someone you didn't like. It was the sort of the making a Stringer Bell type character if you've watched The Wire, or a character that is a bad guy, but is someone that is also charming and likable.
Right.
And so that was really important to find that. And originally we were even talking about doing a version of Ray that was different every single time. So implying that Ray was sort of a myth or a person that, had, people playing him. So you never knew who he was or who he actually was.
Right.
That was sort of the initial idea, was you'd shoot like 3 or 4 different videos and Ray would be a different person every single time, as if he had sort of masked his identity. What really changed that was we had the opportunity, there was an art gallery out here that did a lot of immersive and cool experimental stuff called Think Tank Gallery. And I was friends with the curator and owner of it. And he's like, hey, I'd love for you guys to do something here. We're doing, it's called Drinking, Smoking, and West Coasting, a show about sort of LA life.
Okay.
Would love to get you guys to do a thing out here. So we decided, well, this is a chance to kind of try out some stuff before we open. So what if we do Ray's origin story and use it sort of like a small, intimate, immersive experience? It's up for 2 people at a time. You could do it alone or with a friend, but 1 or 2 people, so really small, really intimate, and it was all actor-driven, all story-driven. And for some stupid reason, we decided to do 3 different shows each night. So the idea is you could come back to back to back and do all 3 shows, or do one of them, but if you did them back to back to back, they sort of would stack up.
Okay.
And so it was basically the 3 most important like days leading up to Ray's like life as a drug kingpin. So we were casting Ray, and we were going to cast different actors as Ray when he was younger, Ray when he was sort of a little wiser, and then Ray like senior drug dealer. And we met this amazing actor named Sydney. And Sid had this drive behind him. He's a comedian from Chicago. And he's like, I really like this. I really want to do all 3 nights. We're like, dude, this is going to be really hard. This is going to be,
Right.
We sold out the show. We have, back to back to back, a little limited break. Like, this is going to be rough.
Right.
And he's like, no, I want to do it. So he did all 3 nights. He played Ray all 3 nights.
Yeah.
And after that, it was like he nailed the role. He is hilarious. He is charming. He's quick on his feet, but also has an air of menace to him that just really worked. And so it sort of helped that we used these 3 things to develop Ray's backstory and helped us sort of put the polish on where Ray is now.
Yeah.
So that was really fun, but that also like we kind of had to stick with Sid for Ray. Like we had no choice because he was so perfect for this character, and he thankfully was game for it. He was really into the character, and he's been an amazing partner. We still work with him on projects, so it's been really cool to have Ray be the linchpin of this. And then as far as the writing of Stash House proper, it was really about what was the space and what is it now.
Right.
In our world, Ray, got into the life of a drug dealer. He had some success. He ended up screwing over people, sort of very Machiavellian style, and realized that he had to be aggressive to be able to succeed. And it was really a way of him lifting himself away from the life that he was in and trying to make something of himself. And so, it was the idea that he is not without empathy, but he realizes it's a weakness and that he needs to be willing to throw anyone under the bus and use people and manipulate people with their weaknesses to succeed. And now that he's successful as a crime kingpin, he still has to have armies of people beneath him.
Right.
The apartment that you're in K-Town is basically his first apartment. And the idea is we designed it in a way that, okay, if Ray came of age and got money, at 16 and 17, he had cash, he would get an apartment. What would he decorate it as? What would it be? Right. And, who are his influences? What would he be doing there? What would he care about? What would not care about? So black leather couches, the silk sheets, like all those things were very much about, modeling it after Ray, but also looking at references, looking at movies and TV shows and games that have sort of these environments in place, and looking at real stash houses and real, what young drug dealers are living in. We've gotten so many compliments from people saying I dated a drug dealer, or this apartment.
That's awesome. Yeah.
So it felt very authentic. We wanted to, we weren't trying to stereotype. We weren't trying to, make fun. We were trying to embrace this is an interesting lifestyle and it's an interesting choice. These people, these characters that have to sort of form to live in this world, it was very intriguing to us.
Right.
So the idea is that Ray always had a fondness for this apartment and always kept it. And we know people that still have their first apartments because they have a decent rent for it. They use it for underground stuff.
Right.
So that's the idea, is that Ray lives elsewhere now. He's much more successful, but this is sort of a place he's got a fondness for and does sort of more underground stuff. And then as far as the fiction, Dawn and I were hired by Ray, or manipulated by Ray, to basically make this a testing ground for unsuspecting people to be part of his crew. Right. So that's how we fit in the picture, is that Ray is listed as the owner of the business. People email him. Yeah. He's the one that sends you confirmation. Yeah. And then Don and I are just sort of unwitting pawns in his game.
Yeah. And that's awesome. Yeah. I love how everything is just integrated and adds to that immersiveness and awe, right? And so can you kind of talk about on how, because I know you said that you started Stash House pretty early on in your, I guess, escape room endeavor.
Yeah.
Right. So how has it evolved from when you first started to where it is now, right? Because when you, even looking back, 5-10 years ago, when escape rooms were barely beginning, it's changed from, I think, at least in my opinion, from escape rooms to that trendy word, immersive experience or immersive theater. And so how has Stash House, I guess, evolved, or even, I guess, adapted, if that is a better word?
I would say it hasn't. It's been pretty much frozen in amber since 2019, which is a high compliment. People are still showing up.
Right.
Yeah. For us, it was the very first escape room I had designed, and it was, a testament to the process, which is something that people think I'm crazy for. But Dawn, and I sat back and started building, and had a lot of ideas, and in my mind, I wanted to test and really prove those ideas out.
Yeah.
So we tested a lot, and we tested in multiple phases over a period of 3 to 4 months.
Okay.
A lot of it was really about placement, about figuring out where people move. And so we had different testing phases. I had all spreadsheets I had made. We invited people. Yeah. And we would sit there, and we would sit in the room for the first couple of groups and just watch where people moved, and made a heat map of where people moved around the space. Yeah. A lot of the discoveries that are in the game were because of us watching. We had ideas and things we wanted to try, and then we would see they didn't work, and or something worked unexpectedly, or people did things that are like, oh, that's cool. What if we did that? Right. And so every game we'd sit there and have ideas. We'd obviously ask for feedback, but the point of testing is that you should pretty much know what people are going to say by the time they're ready to talk. You should know based on their behavior and the game, how it's played out, what's working, what's not. And we would then sit back, we'd make changes, and the next group would come in. And then after sort of a couple rounds of testing, we would then go and make more progress, and it was all about, we didn't lock in a single puzzle until we started testing. And it was a matter of, okay, well, if this is going to be painted here or installed here, we want to make sure it works. So let's do a paper and cardboard version first, make sure that's the right spot for it. Okay, it's working over here. Let's now mount it down, or let's now make it more permanent. And it was really about taking these processes little by little and pushing them forward with data. And that was really, really important to us. So the first group that ever came and played, I think they played like 30% of the puzzles. They were all cardboard on paper, and they didn't even know there was an upstairs. So it was cool because we gave every tester in those early days tickets to come back later. And it was cool seeing them come back and see the finished product. But once we got locked in, and the big note I give to people is like, don't make changes that are big unless you have a motivation behind it. The goal is you're progressively making big structural changes at the beginning, and then as you're ironing, at the kinks, the process makes it smaller and smaller.
Yeah.
Where you're doing small polishes, and then the biggest goal is to keep track of that data once you're open and have that serve as a final proving ground, because your testers are always going to be playing in a different psychological mindset. They're either people that know you or part of the community, or they're playing for free.
Right.
The people that are really going to be your real testers are the people paying for a ticket who don't know you.
Right.
Those are your real motivated people to actually have a good time,
right.
who are entitled, not in a bad sense, but entitled, and will play in a way, again, that they're going to play fully vested as if you are a business.
Right.
And that's the most crucial people, because that's your customer base. And if your first group of people coming through don't feel like they're having a good time, or there's struggles, so that's where you really are doing your final round of testing, is your first month of operations. So we consider it like our previews. And then once that was there, we would make small changes, and then really like keeping an eye on things, because the change factor is important, because it tells you if something is, like if you have a weird spike in your data of like this puzzle that people are getting hints on 5% of the time or 4% of the time is now needing 15% of the time help. Something's up, and it means something has been worn or reset incorrectly, or there's an issue. So the data really helps you not only make sure the game is working as a whole, but also to catch maintenance issues and little things like that, and catch quality. And that's something that drives me nuts in games, especially established ones, where you're like, come on, like it's not hard to go through and see what's worn. If you keep track of hints and data, you can track and make sure the game is still functioning the way it's intended. Right. And that's the really important part to me, is that, is the game, if the game is high quality and people are, expecting a certain standard from it, you have a burden to make sure you're maintaining it.
Right.
So yeah, once it was sort of locked in, we haven't touched it. We made one set of improvements within the first few months, and then just changing a couple of things that weren't being included properly, or that people were getting hints on, and we made those changes. But once it sort of got locked in place, we still monitor for maintenance and stuff. But yeah, it's been sort of set, and that's from a mindset of economical purposes. You look at who's going to come back. Stash House has been played by a huge number of people, and still people are coming. Changing a puzzle or investing in the space, again, doesn't make a lot of sense. Unless we completely revamp it, which also doesn't make sense right now. It's still selling. So at some point, we'll probably go back and do a complete, overhaul, or do something crazy with the space while we have it. We had plans to do a bonus game. Yeah, that actually the puzzles are already hidden inside, and they're just not clued.
Okay.
So that people won't find them. And the hidden area is already installed, and the mechanism to unlock it is already installed. So at some point, we might add that if we redo things, but for now we realized it works.
Right.
And there's no point in messing with that formula. As a creator, of course, I'd love to go through it. I'd love to change everything. Right. From a business side, it just doesn't make a lot of sense.
Right. Oh yeah. And I think it's a lot of people don't take into consideration, especially for games that have been around for a while, just how expensive they can be. Right. And just talking to another escape room creator, he was talking about pouring, 30, 40, $50,000 into a room. It's like, that is insane. Like,
that's nothing now.
Right, exactly. And that was right. That's back then. And compared to now, when everything's even just more expensive, it's like, it amazes me that how escape rooms are doing so well, and then still creating new rooms, right? Still being beautiful, intricate, designs, and it's still making, money, profit off of it. But you mentioned working with other people, collaboration. Can you kind of talk about how that affects your creative process, especially, like you've said, as a person alone, you have a bunch of ideas, and even more so when you have other minds working with you.
Yeah, so Don was my first big collaborator, as my writing partner and business partner in Stash House, and I really liked it. And I think to me, it's like, it taught me that having another person to bounce ideas off of, to keep a check on you, and to sort of help make sure you're hitting the right sort of concept for a project is really important.
Right.
And it's really about the trust factor. And if you find a partner or people you can trust and really allow, I always point to the magic of like puzzle solving. When you have a group of people together that work together, invariably they will be better at solving something than a single person. There's sort of an alchemy that comes from people sharing an idea and pointing something out. And you're like, oh, wait, no, that. Oh, what about this? And you work together. And I feel the creative process is the same way. Okay. When you're working with other people that you trust, you're able to bring about, better ideas or help inspire each other. And, even if someone's like, I don't necessarily think that's a great idea, what about this? And if you really are insisting on your idea, it's good to have pushback, because you then have to justify your idea and find other ways. It's not just like pushing forward. So to me, that's really valuable. So yeah, Dawn was my really big first one. And I've worked with a ton of amazing people since, because I've worked on a bunch of other escape room projects and immersive stuff. It's my full-time job is designing this stuff. And so that really led for me having a healthy relationship with a creator or a partner, to kind of seeking that out whenever I work on another project. I don't like working alone for that reason. I like having someone to call me on my BS, and for someone that can help bring out, a better quality product, and for me to hopefully do the same for them.
Right. And so, sorry. Can you? What was my next? Sorry, I had it until my tongue. Now it's gone. Well, really drawing a blank right here. Oh, that's what it was. Sorry. Okay, so as a not as a business owner side of it, but as a creator side of it, what are your thoughts on rooms or experiences that are coming out that have kind of different levels to play? Right. There's one out there where it's like you can choose, and I understand the reasoning behind it, right? But of where it's like, hey, like this is like a really, I guess, kid version, kid friendly, which is fine. And then, ones for kind of like a little bit more mature, and then one that's like completely R-rated, or one that's even like, hey, like, easy, intermediate, and then like expert or enthusiast, I guess.
I like it. I think to me, the industry, thrives on change, and trying out new experiments. So if there's a way to make something more accessible to people, I'm all for it. I think it's really about, is it actually achieving what its goals are, which is producing a quality game where people go in, feel like it speaks to them, and they walk out wanting to play more, and it's actually good at achieving what it is, then I'm all for it. It's sort of blatant cash grabs where you're charging money for hints or stuff like that, that's seen as a purely greedy thing that's not adding to the experience. But if it's something that is trying to play with a format or experiment with a model, especially leading towards making a better experience or making people, because nothing, I always say, and it's common refrain in the industry, there's no competition that's direct. It's really about, to me, the only bad competition is bad games. Because that invariably is going to have someone's first game spoiled for them, and they're going to walk away from the industry and never want to play another game again, or they'll have to play a couple others before they realize, oh wait, I played a bad first one. But the first thing you do in anything new is always going to set the tone for what the rest of your relationship is like in that industry. And that's the dangerous side of bad companies that are either focused on obviously no one is in this to make it for a charity, but I always of the mind that you will make more money if you make a good thing that people want to talk about, that are excited about. And you may pay more for it. You may not make as much, but in my mind, squeezing customers to get extra 10 or 20% out of them is in my mind, diminishing returns. So any model that tries out new stuff, I think it's great. They may not work. It may not be successful, but to me, customers now have so many options about where they can go. That if you can find a game that people like, if you do a really extreme horror game, for example, and you have a version that's reduced, where the frights are reduced and making it more accessible to people, that to me is in your economic interest. Because there's always a subset of people. Yes, you will get evangelizers and people that love horror that will show up because something's extreme. But you're always going to have people that are going to be turned away because of that as well. And so in my mind, if there's a way to not reduce the quality or the impact of the game by making it more accessible, you're going to sell more tickets by making it where some people can play a non-frightening version or something like that. But again, I think it speaks to the owners and to the people that run the game. Are they able to make something of quality in both versions?
Right, right. So as a creator, then what genre, I guess, of escape rooms do you like creating? Right, more horror, more adventure, more.
I am open to I like being a writer and saying like, what's your favorite story? I love all stories that are interesting to me.
Right.
It's really about the challenge. If someone's like create a generic game, a zombie prison, whatever, I would be kind of annoyed. It's really about creating weird stuff for me at this point. That's trying to explore. I guess if it is taking a theme that's been explored to death, what's something you can do that sort of turns those tropes on its head?
Right.
You're kind of at a risk of playing with old tropes. I don't think I could ever do a pirate game, for example. I've played a lot of big pirate games. Some of them are amazing. You're sort of left with tropes though that you're kind of like, what else can you do?
Right.
So I kind of like going with genres that are kind of unexplored, that are more story based. I work with a lot of IP for companies like Amazon or Netflix or Disney, and working with IP is really interesting because you're dealt with a lot of restrictions, but you're also able to explore stories that people are very familiar with, and it's really fun to play in those worlds, especially if you have a little more freedom. So yeah, to me, it's like if I'm doing something on my own, I want to play with things that are unexpected,
Okay.
or genres or things that have twists or surprises in it. So yeah, I would say pretty much anything. I kind of like challenges, but to me, it's always about, for me, can I put a twist on it? Can we find a way to make it surprising to people,
Right.
or do a mechanic or a cool element that is going to be unexpected or really, really fun to play with?
Right. Yeah. What about as a player? Any favorite that you like? Hey, like.
Again, unexpected stuff. I love mechanics that are untested, or not untested, but like explored in other areas. Like I love time loops. Time loops are really cool. They're some of my favorite storytelling. Time travel and time loops are really fun. And there aren't a lot of games where I've seen that expressed in the full way I think is possible. Either little hints you might get with cool changes where you go in a room and walk back and it's changed. Like, that's cool. Like, I love big scenic reveals.
Yeah.
But those are expensive and hard to do. And it's cool. It's mind-blowing. I love big scenic stuff. I'm a big sucker for big scenic stuff, but who isn't? But to me, it's also intimate storytelling. Like, is there a story that can actually make me cry or can surprise me? Most people who play story in games, if you're playing a video game, you might want to start skipping cutscenes because you're like, yeah, come on. But it's, to me, a story that can hook me in a way that's not forcing me to watch a 3-minute intro video,
Right.
and force me to listen to audio logs. Like, again, I'm not playing a game to be lectured at. So it's games that can inject story in the design choices, in the storytelling aspects of that. I think I really like that. But also, I think just anything that can surprise me. I love twists or unexpected stuff. Some of the simplest puzzles, I think, done in really cool story-driven ways, So, yeah, I think that's what I always am looking for, is just what's unusual stuff. And it's cool because, I've played over almost 700 games now. I have friends that have played thousands.
Right.
And, there's little small weird mom and pop companies that still pop up and will go play, and they'll do something really cool and unexpected.
Yeah.
And that's what's really exciting, is that you never know. Like, every game I kind of go in optimistic about, like, what are they going to do that's cool?
Right.
And it's not that I'm jaded. I've seen a lot of stuff, but I still get excited when there's something really interesting popping out.
Right.
But yeah, for me, like, time loops are really cool, and I want to see more of them, because I think there's some really cool stuff with the idea of like learning from trying and failing and then resetting. That's really interesting to me. There's a game in Canada, in Montreal, that is a time loop game, and they do some really cool stuff, but I think they're just scratching the surface on what you can do with like a time loop.
Okay. Awesome. Can you tell us about a time where you were able to be, I guess, your most creative, sorry.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's my job to make stuff like this. And so I think, due to NDAs and projects, like I have to be more vague, but my favorite moments are figuring out ways to craft engaging moments for audiences, and getting people to sort of come out of their shells.
Yeah.
I love nothing more than getting a group of enthusiasts or people that are diehard solvers coming and having fun. But that's kind of fish in a barrel. Making a good game will get them excited. But to me, it's getting people that are not yet enthusiasts or not yet passionate about the stuff to discover they are.
Right.
And so it's, people that come into a game or into experience, arms crossed. I always call it like the kids that are too cool for school. They're just our body language blocked off. They stand far away from a puzzle. They're not engaging with the group.
Right.
And then watching as that behavior can melt.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's when I'm at my best, is being able to craft something that gets people to initially look at something and be like, this is impossible. And then 5 minutes later, they're diving in, they're noticing stuff. Yeah. So that's probably my favorite reward. For a specific instance, there is a project I worked on that needed to sort of fill in a gap. We had a moment with actors that had a story, and we needed to kill some time with the story. That was kind of required based on the IP. People expected it, but they client was a little bit nervous about it because they're like, well, do we really need this? But I really wanted to fight for it because I'm like, we can do a really cool moment of storytelling and audience agency helping shift the story. So these two characters were fighting, and I kind of crafted the story that, you could help one of the two characters, but I wanted to kind of reward and have all these possible outcomes. And no, this is too complicated. But basically, I pitched a way of pulling it off where these people were fighting and then they would separate, and you would be able to go and help either one of them or both, or you could try to broker peace between them. Mm-hmm. And it required you, if you're going to try to broker peace, you had to figure out what actually was the source of their conflict.
Right.
And so you had to go do research a little bit escape roomy and go do some digging in the environment and find out what actually happened between them. Mm-hmm. And if you did and brought evidence to both of them, then you could actually cause peace to happen. But that was like the super bonus thing. And we had little trailheads peeking at the people could sort of pull those threads if they wanted to, but that was like ultra hard mode. That was like bonus Easter egg. And then, you could go and help one side or the other. You could even cheat and be like, I'm helping you, and then secretly go over and help the other guy and be like, so, but it was cool because there were multiple outcomes that would come out. And so if you went multiple times, this event would feel like, oh, there's an infinite number of outcomes. In the reality, there's only a handful. Right. And the actors knew what each one was. Right. And there was a way in which they'd know who would win that night. And then the winner would boast, the loser would sulk. And you could still feel like, oh, I helped this person win, or oh no, this guy lost, let me go console him. But it gave so many outcomes, and it affected so much of the story in a really positive way. Yeah. But the people involved were like, no one's going to do this Easter egg one. And I was nervous because I didn't want that to be every night. But we ran a bunch of tests of it, of the whole experience, and we ended up getting pretty much every outcome. Person A won, person B won, and then the Easter egg happened. Right. And the person who solved it was so excited. And when it worked, it was magical because then it sort of opened up and made it feel like, oh, anything is possible here. And that was kind of the goal, was working on something where you feel as an audience member, anything is possible. Like there's magic here. There's magic in the story, in the space. And in reality, it isn't. There's only a handful of things. You don't know that. Right. And to me as an audience member, I love discovering when I talk to a character or I solve something and the environment responds or a story reacts. And you just, for the brief moment, you feel like you're in a story and that you're affecting it. You're a hero. Right. So I like creating those moments. And I was really proud of how I could, taking a really complicated thing and simplifying it and then showing to the client and showing to the world, like, this works and it can work really effectively, regardless of how the outcome plays out. So yeah, I like taking stuff like that, challenges, and playing that.
That's awesome. Can you tell us about the most creative, because I mean, you mentioned that you played 700 plus rooms. The most creative, or it can be a handful, creative puzzle that you've experienced.
The most creative?
Yeah.
Probably there's a puzzle that I really loved in a game in Hamburg, Germany, from a game called Ernie Hudson and the Wailing Woman. It involves a bell, and I won't spoil it, but I found it really, really cool. It's very story driven, and the moment is just really, really cool. And it really inspired me because of how simple it is. Yeah. And it's a puzzle, but again, it's just like what we talked about. Like, it feels very open-ended, but the design of it is really clever, and it's really inspired me. And I'm sure I've probably made it better in my mind because of how effective it was for us as a group. And in talking to other people who have played it, it may not have been as effective for them. Like, we happen to have a really good GM. The puzzle made sense to us. It took just the right amount of time. But to me, it was one about information and paying attention. And I really like that. Like, the idea of a good puzzle is dependent upon the context. A good puzzle, like there's one that I love that's like a beautiful word puzzle that is one of my favorite logic puzzles ever. But I would never put that in a game because that's one you need to sit with for a long time.
Right.
It's better to work out on your own. There's video game puzzles that are, again, amazing that I would never put in a room. So to me, a really good escape room puzzle is dependent upon what's good to solve as a group.
Yeah.
Is it fun? Is it somehow physical? Is everyone in the group? Is it fun to watch? Is it fun to play? Does it have insights for everyone? So it's hard. Like, there's amazing puzzles that are good for like 2 people that as soon as you put 3, it's not working. So to me, it's like, I'm really picky context-wise about like a perfect escape room puzzle is one of which the group succeeds. And it's usually something also physical as well as mental that just is fun to do. But the one in that German game, the Wailing Woman game, was just really fun because it served the space really well. It would not work in another medium.
Right.
But that's always kind of what I'm looking for is, stuff that uses a physical space well, and that the group, like, one of my favorite group of designers is Matt Ty he has Arcane out here, and then Spencer BB and him from Escape Chronicles. They created a company called Level Games, and they made some really cool games that have some amazing physical puzzles, that have amazing contraptions and just really cool reveals. That just like, I always would get so delighted at seeing how they would use the medium of escape room design really well. Where again, it's like a physical puzzle in a space that you're physically manipulating as a team, and seeing this stuff get revealed is just so cool. Yeah. And then Patrick Fye, who made the games Evil Genius, the game The Morgue that he did, his 3rd chapter of his Evil Genius saga, has some incredible puzzles that are just like, also I think good puzzles in my mind are about establishing a tone. It's not just solving something. It's putting you in the mindset of, what are you actually physically doing for your answer? Like, just typing in a keypad is kind of boring. But if it's you trying to, like, the bad version of this would be like, I'm solving it by pushing my hand somewhere, dark and scary, and it's got wet texture to it. And, it's a puzzle about being scared or trusting. And to me, it's like having those extra layers that as you're putting the answer in or as you're solving it, you're having to physically put yourself in the mindset of what the puzzle is.
Yeah.
Obviously, horror games do that very well. So anything that, again, utilizes that method too, of like making you feel something as you're inputting it or researching it, it's like, it's really hard to do.
Yeah.
But when people do it, like, it just sings.
Right. And so as a creator, then how do you implement a puzzle into a good story, right? And obviously making sure that it flows well, not just there's a random puzzle for me to figure out a neighborhood or whatever.
This is an ongoing challenge. I teach a class on escape room design, and this is one of the big things that's sort of my lesson of why are puzzles and escape rooms. Right. There's a debate about it, but it really goes down to intent, and the overall intent and assumption you make as a creator and hopefully as an owner is that your goal is to entertain people.
Right.
We go back to the days of people opening games that have, this is a 5% success rate. And in that case, you designed a bad game. Success rates are pointless and silly and an archaic fad that I wish would just go away. To me, getting people through your game, letting people complete your experience and have a holistically good time rather than like pushing them out as fast as you can or like telling them they're going to fail. Having limited number of hints is really silly and ridiculous. So those tropes I would love to go away. But getting to that point of why puzzles are in games, they're not to trip you up. Right? They should not be there to deliberately block you, where the GM is reveling and laughing because you can't figure it out. Like, to me, those make me angry because they turn people off.
Right.
There's a game where an owner or a GM was telling us before we went in that they group arbitrarily used up their 3 hints early on and sat in the room and was miserable. And I'm like, you're negligent. Like, you should not be doing this. You're terrible as a person and as an owner. I didn't say that, but that's what I felt.
Right.
So to me, like, you can tell when people design puzzles thinking, they're there to trip people up, not to help people succeed. So in my mind, they should be doing 2 things. Puzzles should be building up in intensity and in challenge so that you're progressively getting more confident in the style of the game. You should have some easy wins at the beginning, some things that are a little simpler, more task-based, help you open up the space, and then get progressively more challenging. And then about 2/3 of the way through the game, between the 65 to 75% mark should be the most challenging puzzle in the game. And then the last puzzle or two should be fun and rewarding, probably a big group task of some kind, but then you rushing to finish, get that adrenaline rush, you finish the game, yeah, you did it. So that to me is one purpose of puzzles, is to help that flow of the rising action and then the big whoosh of reward at the end. You walk out feeling this adrenaline high, this excitement.
Yeah.
So obviously your hardest puzzle should not be the last one because you want people to have that last rush at the end.
Yeah. Yeah.
From the other side of it is story driven. In my mind, why are puzzles here? And they're there because a lot of times in new forms of entertainment, people don't know how to consume it. And if you have a book and give it to you, you know how to read it. You're not going to be confused and being like, which page do I look at?
Right.
Yeah, there are some books that play with format and flipping to different pages, but on the whole, you know how to watch a movie too. Again, it's not an experimental movie, it's a standard movie. You hit play, you know where to look, you look at the screen, you watch from start to finish,
Right.
and that's as the creator intended for you to go through it.
Right.
With puzzles and with story, they can serve as a way to gate you, anchor you in the world, and that you are not ready to proceed to the next phase of the story until you've earned the narrative and you've earned that chance to move ahead. So it's really there to block you from spoiling the ending. Because if I, take you to a final room where there's a big emotional climax or there's a cool discovery and you've been building to that and you see the ending early, that doesn't make sense. So puzzles are really there to help you learn and earn what a story is.
Yeah.
So if you can align those two things, the excitement factor and the adrenaline building and the story element, put them together, that's like a perfect puzzle to me, is learning how to place it. So, and then how do they fit in? Obviously, environmentally, they need to fit in sort of what we call like a diegetic way, where they're not just arbitrarily there. There's some amazing games that I've played that have a random Sudoku for no reason.
Yeah.
And unless you're, and there are a couple games that I've seen that are like, you're on the subway or on a bus and there's like a Sudoku book there. And it's like, okay, I kind of understand why you put that. There's a narrative reason why a person is doing Sudoku on the bus, but then why does this Sudoku solve to a code on the bus?
Mm-hmm.
And there's always escape room logic. I understand that. But to me, it's like, it should feel environmentally appropriate to the space. Not every puzzle has to be like very narratively grounded where it's like, why is this here? Who put this here? Why is it here?
Right.
Why did they design the bus this way that the bus needs a puzzle to open? I don't need an answer to all of that. But to me, if you can find a way to ground and justify things, it just makes it better. So integrating them in some capacity and utilizing the environment. I love it when stuff is hidden in plain sight, where at the very beginning you walk into space and you look around and you say, oh, I can sort of start telling what's a puzzle. But it's not just like aggressively standing out.
Right.
I like it. Obviously, you should know what a puzzle is. You shouldn't be mystery as to like what one isn't and then have to figure out what to do. You should know what a puzzle is. It's the solving of it that's the mystery.
Right.
But if they're integrated and kind of cool in a way that they sort of, kind of like when you're looking at paint samples and you're looking at all the whites side by side and you're like, they all look the same. And you stare at it, you're like, oh, the yellows and the reds are coming out a little bit more. Like that to me is also really cool and they're integrated really well.
Right, right. And so then as a creator, do you lean more towards puzzles or more towards I like to call them task-based solve?
I think I think there's a purpose for all of them. Again, I love puzzles. Obviously a task-based solve in a puzzle book or an at-home escape room is not fun. There's no, so it's like, again, it has to be justified for talking a physical space. Task-based and more physical-based things work really well, especially when you're working on a team-based game in a physical space. But to me, I see the task-based and the more mental puzzles and sort of everything in between as being part of a good recipe. A good recipe does not just have one ingredient.
Right.
It uses them all well and appropriately. So to me, it's like I like seeing a good mixture and a good progression of how are you using the space.
Right.
How are you using the puzzle types? Is there a nice variety of things to do? Are they all grounded and justified in the story? Are they progressing things appropriately? And if you can start checking these things off, then you're doing the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's been multiple times recently where we go to do an escape room right? It leans a lot more towards just doing the completing a task
Mhm.
as opposed to the puzzle part. And me personally, I like that satisfaction of like, you know, you put in, numbers or whatever, and like a little click, a little ding, or that little, you hear something open, like,
Right.
okay, where is it, right? And so as the industry is continuing to evolve, do you think more rooms now are leaning more towards that completing a task to, I guess, um, not justify, but adapt to that immersive theater aspect of it?
I think everyone's different. I think every creator's different, and I think you're going to keep seeing people experimenting with
Right.
it. I think to me, like, I love, again, formats that play around with different things.
Yeah.
I really like rooms and games that have actors where the actor is part of the puzzle.
Right.
And especially if it's satisfying.
Right.
I love games that work in unison where you might learn a fact or an information where the actor is not engaging with you or is not helping at a certain point, but then you go physically solve a puzzle, open up like a safe, for example, get a bit of info about them.
Mhm.
And then it's like, the actor, this character has a trigger word where if you say this word, they'll switch into spy mode and help you. And then you look at the character and you're like, rutabaga, and then they transform. Like, it's really cool seeing that stuff play out.
Yeah.
So I like it when there's task-based things that have a clear payoff. What I don't like is when things are just purely manually triggered because of an arbitrary thing. That feels less magical to me. And there are games that I think can do it well. But to me, that's where I really get frustrated with the task-based stuff, is if it's arbitrary.
Right.
To me, it's like, okay, with telling a character a code word that is grounded narratively and is earned through doing other puzzles, and you get to that point and you get it. There's a reason why that code word is locked down, and then the actor has a clear payoff, and then that progresses the story to the next phase. To me, that's structured well. But if it's really about like the actor, or the person watching on camera didn't see you do the thing the first time, and you're like, I'm doing the magic dance. It says do a dance in a circle, and if I'm doing it and it's not triggering, you're like, I don't know what's going on. To me, it should never be about ambiguity. It should be about clarity and certainty.
Yeah.
And if it's doing a task, I want the task to have some kind of payoff.
Yeah.
That's probably not manually triggered, or if it is done well where I don't know how it is done.
Right.
So to me, it's like, I think it's more I'm responding to the quality of the design and how well it's being run.
Yeah.
Because that's the other aspect too, is you can craft an amazing world renowned game.
Yeah.
But if it's not able to be run on a Tuesday at 10 a.m.
Right.
and every Saturday for 5 years, maybe not 5 years, but if it's not able to be run consistently at that same quality, you do not have a world-class game.
Right.
It has to be run consistently. And that part of it is that if you're doing a task or a process or your performer is doing something, it has to be consistent across that. And that's one of the dangers.
Right.
Is, with the students I work with, they only have to make a game that is run a few times.
Right.
But when you make a decision, there's a big eye-opening fact at McDonald's where they decided to add kale to their salad. And suddenly they became the biggest kale supplier in the country. You don't think about that scale, but it's at that. It's very much like that. Where you're going to have this thing happening in your game, and it sounds cool, but that means you have to make sure every single game, every single staff member you have, every single actor you have, whatever, is doing this consistently at the same quality for every game.
Right.
If I tell you to watch this amazing movie and you watch it, we're not going to be confused because the movie's not going to change between where maybe, George Lucas might re-edit it, but it's going to be consistent, same movie. But if I tell you go play this amazing game and you have a different experience because the actor or the prop piece is not performing as envisioned, that's the danger, I think, of trying really crazy stuff, is it has to be consistent.
Right.
So to me, it's like, as long as companies are nailing the consistency of it, the feeling that it's not confusing what you're doing, if you're doing something weird that has to be a task or manually triggered, it still feels satisfying.
Yeah.
It still feels like you're solving a puzzle and it's aiding your journey and the things are flowing really well together.
Right.
So yeah, I think it's just really about any experimental stuff learns from what's working and fixes it. Because if it's not, change it. Like, again, I love going and trying stuff that is trying weird, cool stuff.
Mhm.
And if I walk out disappointed, I'm always like, cool, how do you improve that?
Yeah.
So I admire people taking that swing, but the hope is that people taking that swing realize it's not paying off and fix it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so then as a creator, how do you ensure that consistency, and not just for the player, but also for in this case, for the game master, right? Because we've been to multiple rooms where, hey, we're doing the seance, we put the key here, like, and they're like, oh, sorry, give me a second, or, oh, like, try it again, and like do it again. They're like, oh, there it goes. Like, and they obviously had to trigger something. So how do you ensure that?
Yeah, I mean, you can't guarantee 100% of the games are going to work, but what you can guarantee is a system in place that empowers your staff. And GMs are the linchpin of this industry because they're the ones that are running a game day to day.
Right.
And it's making sure, do they actually care about the game?
Right.
There are a lot of staff members and people at games I played that just do not care.
Yeah.
And you can feel that. And they can make a good game bad. Yeah. On the other end, I've played with staff that clearly are passionate about what they do.
Yeah.
And the owners have bad to average games, and that passionate staff member who cares makes that and elevates that game higher.
Yeah.
So to me, it's really the difference between, it's sort of like you have a letter grade. They can make a game an A+, that's normally an A-, mm-hmm. or they can make a game that's an A-, like a B-, and they really are bad.
Right.
So to me, you really want to empower your staff. You want to make sure that they're trained well, that you have processes in place that are easy to follow.
Yeah.
As much automation as possible, but then as much manual intervention as possible. So if your staff is watching and, a good example, if they're watching and listening, they'll know when you solve stuff.
Right.
And if you're putting in a code and they see you've put in 5 of the right numbers and you said the right thing, but maybe you didn't hit the thing fast enough, mm-hmm. they should trigger it for you. You got it right.
Right.
It's awkward when you put it in and you don't know, is it the hardware? It's the element of trust,
right,
which is a really important factor in game design.
Yeah.
There's a really good example. There was a game played a couple years ago where a lot of the tech was not working.
Right.
And, at the halfway point of this game, we're not trusting the tech.
Right.
Whereas one puzzle in this room we have not solved, and we are not sure what we're looking for. And this game has a lot of thematic design with candles.
Right.
And a lot of the candles were broken. And we assumed that was because the game was jank. A lot of stuff has not worked.
Right.
And it's only after we're like, oh, the ones that are burnt out are actually on purpose. That was hiding Morse code or something.
Yeah.
But because we had already had this sense of lack of trust in the game, where the keypads weren't working, the tech was broken, that we weren't looking at things that were deliberately off in order to keep progressing.
Yeah.
And if you don't trust a game, you're going to be, if you have an answer wrong, you're going to be like, is it us wrong or is it the game? Right. You're going to be a little salty, your attitude's going to affect things. So that's another reason to have your GMs on top of stuff, be on top of maintenance. Because again, if you're salty, it just, that attitude can sort of seep and poison the group you're in.
Yeah, for sure.
And so again, that's why having staff that also are empowered to check the game, not just reset, but look and see, is there, is this map where people are touching things, where they're fingering it, is it worn? Do I need to replace it? Are there clear signs of wear and tear on this prop? In the data, if you have data collection that's automated, that should also help you. Mm-hmm. But to me, it's really building a game, again, that can be run, and you're setting up your staff for success.
Right.
That's really huge. I think it's the least sexy part of a game is the business side of it. People don't get in to be like, how can I make a operational system that's going to be awesome and train staff? But it is really important. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't treat their staff of that. They pay the minimum wage and, treat them like they're there because they have to be. But again, in my mind, if you empower your staff, give them bonuses, give them as much incentivization to care, you can make sure your game lasts. And of course, stuff happens. It's also, how do you make sure it's dealt with?
Yeah.
And so if something does happen, can they enter the game in character?
Right.
If something is screwed up, can they still make it a fun interaction?
Right.
And as opposed to being like, oh, hold on, walking in a game. Okay, what have you solved?
Right.
What do you need help with? It's like, ooh, blood boils.
Right. Yeah, no, it definitely kills the immersiveness. There was a ring that my wife and I did with a group, and not hating on the way that they would give clues or, come and help, but essentially their whole thing was, they would come in every 15 minutes, and after 30 minutes have passed in the game, then they'd come every 20 minutes. And so they would come in, not even in character, and usually for me personally, in a scary or spooky room, it's important to have that darkness and that spooky feeling to it, right? Because if not, even a little light will kill the whole thing, right? The light on my watch shines like crap, doesn't feel like it anymore. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, hey guys, you need help? Or everything going okay?
Oh, to me, it's like there are so many elements of what's wrong with a lot of companies that don't even try the base level of raising the immersion, or just trying to at least try and keep it fun.
Yeah.
So you're right; those things sap away the energy.
Yeah.
You know, I've given talks at conferences where people challenge me and say, like, I don't have to do that. And it's like, you don't have to, but if you want your customers to have 5% better experience, like in my mind, why wouldn't you? If it's minimal effort,
Yeah.
anything that you can do to raise the bar of your company or the quality of your game or the experience is worth doing.
Yeah.
And that's just stuff that's free.
Right.
The attitude you bring to staff or empowering them to have fun with it, like,
Yep.
to me, those things are free and they add more. And then even with minimal expenditure, you can still raise the bar of your lobby. Or so to me, there's no excuse for not doing it. And I think, again, companies that refuse to, are going to fall behind.
Yeah.
I don't want anyone in this industry to go out of business, except for companies that refuse to evolve or treat customers, in their games at that level.
Right. Right. And so you mentioned something about the, and I think this adds to the immersiveness too of the lobby, right? And I mentioned this before to when talking to another guest of, it's amazing to see how the lobby or even how the restroom, right? I saw a Facebook post of like, hey guys, like how important is, having an amazing restroom setting to your experience? And like, it was like 50, 60, 80% of them were like, yeah, like it's super important. Like it needs to play along with like, with the whole vibe of the lobby as opposed to, just white walls, this and that. And so, even just stepping into a lobby or maybe and obviously to how you've designed Stash House, right? Maybe not even having like, but how important is it to adding to that immersive?
Oh, 100%. There's a quote that repeatedly gets said in this industry, but and it comes from a Nordic LARP designer named Joanna. That is, everything is a designable surface, everything. And to take that one step further, if you have not intentionally designed something, lack of intentional design does not mean it's not been designed. You've just inadvertently left it the way it was. So there's a talk I give on how do you apply intentional design to everything in your business and why you should care. And it's because, anything that touches your customer or a guest affects their experience. And if you are not controlling it, you're just sort of like arbitrarily going, well, we'll see what happens. Why wouldn't you try to apply some basic level of control of their experience from your ticketing platform, the website, the pre-game communication, directions about parking, when they arrive, hints, bathroom breaks, how you store items, the policies about when you take a photo afterwards, like everything in that process should be designed both to amp up the customer, to make sure you've reinforced the good time they've had, and then empower them to feel connected to your business so that when they leave, they want to tell people, oh my God, you never guess what I just did.
Yeah.
And whenever they share that experience, they'll relive the memory of what they've done.
Right.
And it's a chance to really, again, control as much as you can. Yes, there's stuff you can't control. You can't control kind of day they've had.
Right.
You can't control the weather.
Right.
You can't control even some elements of like a meteor could crash into your building or the power could go out.
Yeah.
Why would you surrender control to the things you can control?
Right.
It just seems silly. So to me, and I've gotten pushback, but hopefully more people have listened to that lesson of try to design everything you can and be intentional about it, even if it's very minimal, but it all affects the experience at the end. A lobby, you have multiple first impressions. You have the first impression of, what am I buying a ticket to? What's the communication like? I bought a ticket. When they show up on site, the lobby is that first meeting moment when you go on a date and you see the person, like, what do you see? And oftentimes, if it's a bad lobby or a bad experience with a GM, I mean, there's a game I played with my friends a couple years ago where we were sitting outside in the parking lot eating dinner between, we were playing a bunch of games that day and we had no time for dinner. So we grabbed fast food, we were shoving, food in our face, and we get inside and asked to use the bathroom. And the staff member is like, you shouldn't sit outside in the parking lot and not come inside and use the bathroom because you're going to be late for your game. First thing he said to us.
Wow.
And he did not realize that we were owners who happened to be friendly with the owner of his company. And we weren't looking to get him in trouble, but we were pretty salty. And so we shared, and he definitely was very different to us when we got out of the game. Not that we're looking for good behavior, but it's like, don't be a jerk when you're greeting customers. Yeah. Like, I don't know what that intention was, but it definitely is like, your first interaction with the lobby, with the staff, is setting your tone for that entire interaction. And if you start negatively, you are doing yourself a disservice where people may still love the game, but nick you for, having a bad interaction. And that you just don't know who you're greeting. You don't know what there are so many experiences I've had in life where I run into someone or do something, I have no idea who they are, and turns out they had a big impact on something. And if I had been a jackass or a jerk, like I could have affected that negatively.
Yeah.
You just never know. Like every customer is the most important one at that moment because they will potentially tell 1 million people about your business, or they might tell them to avoid it.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
So
yeah. And you talked about this a little bit. What are your thoughts on rooms that have I don't want to say no phone policy, but like no picture policy? Like, hey, you want to take a picture? Sure. It has to be this specific background or
I think it's hit or miss. I think to me, I understand the intention behind it.
Right.
For us at Stash House, we try to avoid people pulling out their phones just because I've been in those groups where someone's on their phone and it's distracting.
Yeah.
You want to try to control the environment as much as possible.
Right.
But at the end of the day, you should never feel like you're having to wand your customers because you're walking into some top secret nuclear test site.
Right.
There's a game one of the first games I played in LA that literally wands you like you're going through the security at an airport. And I'm just like, this is dumb. Like, what do you care about? So if someone videos your game, like, who cares? What are they protecting? Like, who's going to watch that video and go, I shouldn't go play that? What are you spoiling? So to me, I think it's silly when people get bent out of shape. I don't mind if they say, please keep your phones in your pockets or, but I also, if they take my phone from me, I think it's dumb.
Yeah.
So I would say, like, I completely empathize. I don't think it's necessary anymore.
Right.
And I think, in fact, anything that can make the customer feel like they're not being trusted or they're not being treated well is bad. And anything that a customer wants to do, they're going to do anyway.
Yeah.
And, trying to encourage people to not break the immersion and still have fun.
Right.
Having a jackass in the corner on their phone is annoying, but at what cost by making the group feel like they're being scolded or going through some high-level security? So there are some contentious times where, I play with groups where, they ask for your phone and like, why?
Yeah.
And they get real snappy. It's like, no, you don't want to start out that contentious relationship like that. So to me, it's like, I don't think it's important. I think when companies are like, cool, user phones doesn't matter, like, cool, great. Yeah. I won't pull my phone out.
Right.
But, if another group wants to go through and take photos in a game, like, sure, who cares?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, and for me, even like our first 40, 50 rooms, it wasn't forced, it was like implied, like, hey, like, you want to lock up your phone for safekeeping, like, you might end up crawling or running and you don't want it to get
I take stuff out of my pockets because, like, when I'm crawling or walking, I don't want my keys digging into me, like, especially games are very physical.
Yeah.
I don't want to sit on my phone. So I might leave it behind in that instance, but I like having, because invariably I take photos with my phone and I don't have to go back to a locker. Right. And I like having it nearby or in the room. So at the very least, letting us have our stuff in the room or in our pockets, and then if we need to get back to it, it's cool. Great.
Yeah.
But I think anything that can put the customer and the staff in opposition, and again, can set off that relationship in a negative way, is not worth it.
Right. Right. Can you talk about how important it is to have I don't want to say a good group when completing an escape room, but a room that works well together, right? Because you mentioned this is where a group can have, that person that's like, I don't want to be here. I just got dragged into it. I'm going to be on my phone.
Yeah, I mean, that's the eternal debate about public versus private bookings.
Right.
I think flat out companies that do public bookings are in the wrong and they're greedy. I understand the motivation, why you would do that, but I would never do it. And I think there are companies that do it that are flat out looking to have more money, and who can argue that as a business? But I think you're also sacrificing your customer experience that way. It's your fault for that group. You're not going to blame the GM.
Right.
But if there's a stranger paired up and you have a bad experience, you will probably end up blaming the game or have a negative experience. And that to me is so crucial, a differentiator, that people don't make that, but they will always associate that negative experience with the game itself. And I don't think it's worth it as a creator who wants people to walk out having a good time. And in my mind, I would argue that the money you lose from not squeezing in groups will mean that every group that walks out has a more optimal experience because the group is not being packed tight by external factors. You can choose to fill it up with a maximum or not.
Right.
You can choose how big your group is. And if you walk out feeling like the experience was better, in my mind, you're going to recommend that company more.
Yeah.
And you're going to get positive word of mouth rather than just like squeezing them for the money and then they walk out annoyed and they're not going to recommend it. Like they have your money, sure, but you're going to get more in my mind from that positive word of mouth. That's how I've always operated, is that word of mouth and positive feelings after a game are more valuable than the initial 20 or 30% you'd get from squeezing more tickets out of them, you know?
Right.
So now the big caveat I'll say is that I have made great friends with strangers I played in games. 2 of my best friends I met playing a game early on.
Mm.
And that is magical when you get people to connect that way.
Yeah.
But the risk I think you take from matchmaking strangers to play well together to them not getting along and the experience being ruined, I would always defer to private games.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on our episode today. And then for our listeners, if you haven't done so already, go ahead and make sure to play Stash House.
Yeah, Stash House. My name is Tommy Honton. I've designed a lot of stuff around the world. So just look for me and you'll find something crazy I've done.